Welcome back, everyone. Today we're working on my 1999 BMW E36. It started life as just a little 323, but I fell in love with it, and it looks a little different than the day that I first bought it. A couple years in, I got hungry for more power, even after doing a 2.8 liter swap, and decided to turbo it. So the car now has a factory bottom end, a cut ring head gasket, some nice studs, a 6266 turbo, RSI manifold with a bunch of other goodies. The first engine made 460 horsepower to the tire, and then unfortunately it was an engine I never opened. So 3 little Vanos bolts made their way through the engine and destroyed it all. So that moved us on to our last episode, which was building the second engine for this car, which I had high hopes for. But unfortunately, that video ended in heartbreak because the engine literally lasted me one Sunday afternoon. I don't know why, but we're coming back hopefully stronger than ever. I'm gonna get this car back on the road, this time with a forged bottom end, but I'm hoping to reuse the engine that we just finished because of all the work that went into it. So today we're gonna pull it out of the car, tear down the full long block, figure out what broke, what went wrong so that we can make sure this never happens again. And I don't know, say a prayer. Let's go. So between the life of this car being a 323 swapped out to a 328 and then turbo engine number 1, turbo engine number 2, and now we're going on to turbo engine number 3, this is going to be number 5, the engine number 5 for this car. So as you can imagine, between this car and my friend's cars, getting pretty good at pulling these engines out quickly, which is very unfortunate to brag about and in a way kind of tragic. So I'm curious to try a different method because typically whenever I pull these engines out, it's so easy to pull the front clip off these cars and just yank the whole drivetrain out the front. Honestly, if you're proficient, you can do that in about 3 hours to 4 hours having a running car, and that's taking your time. Now, when you go turbo, there's so much stuff hanging off the front of this car between oil coolers, intercoolers, all of our meth setup, all the wiring. It's far from factory, obviously. I want to try something a little bit different because I finally have a hoist in my shop now, and I'm curious to see if I can try to keep this car as together as possible. Because now that the car is on a VEMS, there's so much additional wiring to support the turbo kit that it's not very quick and plug and play to tear out the engine, keeping the harness on it as if it was stock. So let's see how this goes. Pulling this turbo and exhaust down is really easy with this RSI manifold, and you pair that with the downpipe that was made for me by the guys at Fast Auto Concepts. It's a really simple car to take apart. The downpipe's got a V-band at the very bottom of it, and it was just beautifully crafted. It's one of my favorite parts of this car, and I'm able to pull it right out of the top of the engine bay and pop the turbo off, and the manifold can stay on when the engine itself comes out. So it's about as modular and as simple as it gets. I always get asked why this car sounds so good, and it's a very simple answer. It's a straight pipe with a muffler. It's 3 inches from the back of the turbo all the way up to the back of the bumper with a vibrant street power muffler. End of story. That's it. It does sound incredible. I know the top mount really helps. I've heard some bottom mount E36s, and it's just not that like crisp, almost RB-esque sound. So anyway, that's it. 3 inches out to a muffler. End of story. I'm running a CSF rat on this car with a Spall fan and a Mishimoto tank. The tank was modified a little bit so that we could do a side feed just to help clear all the turbo kit on the car, but otherwise it's a stock E36 cooling system that's been upgraded that is just set up for NA cars, and so far 0 problems even dynoing on a 30-degree day. I get asked a lot what the manifold is on this car, and unfortunately I always have to say I don't know. I bought it from a local speed shop that specialized in BMWs. They had it on their shelf from at least 20 years ago. They ballparked, so it's a bit of a no-name. It does resemble an eBay manifold, and it definitely took a similar amount of work to get to work. And it's paired with a 87.5mm Ross Creations throttle body with a Nuke Performance fuel rail. and so far it's been fantastic. Really nice torque and power numbers out of the car and pretty early on. With just about everything off the engine, it was time to get this transmission pulled off, and this was a trick someone showed me a while ago that helps tremendously. Loosen up the engine mounts and tip the engine backwards so that when you access those top 2 bolts that are almost impossible to get to, the transmission just slides right off. It's a game changer for pulling them off. Unfortunately, I don't have a transmission jack yet because this is an automotive detail shop where we do detailing and coating, not pulling transmissions on old BMWs. So I just had to manhandle this out of here. It hurt. With the transmission off, I undid the last of the engine mounts, took the ground cable off, and that's really all that's left. It's really straightforward and easy to pull these engines out. However, I wasn't sure if I could make this work with the hood still on the car. The engine mount arm wanted to hit so badly that I spent about 20 minutes alone just trying to get this engine out of the car, and it does clear. I wish I had a friend there just to hold the hood past its prop positions, but I didn't want to do it myself because if you push it too far, you will crack the windshield on one of these. Ask me how I know. With the engine out, it was off to Fast Auto Concepts with Luca, who helped me build this engine in the first place, so we could tear this down and figure out what went wrong. With the engine sitting at Luca's ready for its teardown and rebuild, I was so curious to tear this engine down because it was so strange how it failed. For those of you that didn't see the video most recently posted, I literally got 4 hours of driving out of this car. Ultimately what ended up happening was I did a pull with a friend. It was a pretty short third gear that just barely tapped the limiter. And then as soon as I got back to a buddy's place, I was looking at the hood and just saw all the smoke pouring out of the catch can. And it was pulsing almost exactly with the RPM of the engine. So my suspicion was we either damaged a head, burned a piston, broke a ringland. There's a lot of options when that happens. So I was really curious to get this torn down and just figure out what happened. I didn't have the tool that would let me get past the camshafts to reach the head bolts without removing them, but that's okay because I wanted to make sure these SCT2 cams were okay, all the caps were okay, that there was no metallic that made their way through, so pulled everything out so we can clean it again despite how short the runtime was, and pulled this head off. With the head off, much to my surprise, the cylinders seemed fine. There was really light scoring from what we can only assume was just the initial run-in from when we first started this engine, but there was nothing alarming, which was weird. I was expecting some pretty serious scoring considering we had next to no compression in cylinder 1 was our point of failure, which is again another bit of an unusual thing. But everything on this side looked fine, and the head looked okay as well. All the valves passed a test, all the springs, retainers, everything was all good there. So we need to pull these pistons out. The head gasket all looked fine as well. All the cut rings were seated perfectly. There was nowhere where it blew through where there's any sign of leaking or compression getting past the gasket, which was a good sign for the cut ring because ultimately we're making a little over 500 wheel, so that would have been alarming for the cut ring to fail. So we had to pull this piston out to figure out what happened.
Perfect. Nice. It's normal to see that coating. So There she is. Correct. Right?
Yeah, 100%. That's a crack.
Wow.
Oh yeah, look, the whole
Oh, whoa. Whoa. That's cool.
Is it?
It is. Damn. Wow.
Nice that it held itself in though.
Man, right?
That's nuts.
That's cool.
Watching these clips back, I'm not sure why I'm so excited to see my broken engine, but honestly, it was a relief because the block's good, the head's good, and we can reuse this engine. So, going forward and doing it right away, in the next video, you're going to see us forge this bottom end, put this engine back together, slap it in the car in time for spring of 24, and hopefully get a full season out of it. I checked the rest of the engine. There was no surprises, so it was a big relief. I'm going to sleep well tonight. I really appreciate all of you watching, and we'll see you in the next one.